The cattle dog found her dying in the red dirt, shot, rope burned, barefoot, blood soaking through torn calico like spilled wine. Buzzards circled overhead, patient as undertakers. The girl's lips moved without sound, fingers clawing at dust she couldn't hold. Half a mile away, a scarred cowboy with a ruined hand was splitting firewood, trying to forget he'd ever cared about anything. The dog had other plans. He bolted back through sage and stone, barking like the world was ending, because for her, it almost had. And for the man who'd answer that call, everything he'd buried was about to claw its way back into the light. If you're watching from somewhere in this world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Mara's story travels. Hit that like button and settle in, because this one's a long ride through blood, fire, and the kind of love that refuses to die. The wind came down off the ridge like it had teeth, carrying the smell of rain that wouldn't fall and dust that wouldn't settle. Colt Harlan drove the axe into the chopping block and straightened, feeling the pull in his back where the old bullet wound still lived. His right hand, what was left of it, throbbed in the cold. 3 fingers gone below the second knuckle, courtesy of a rope that snapped under 1,000 pounds of panicked steer. The doctors had wanted to take the whole hand. Colt had told them what they could do with their saw. He wiped sweat from his forehead with his left sleeve and looked out across the valley. Raven Gorge spread before him like a scar cut deep into the Wyoming territory, all rock and scrub and loneliness. His ranch, if you could call 20 acres and a sagging barn a ranch, sat at the far end of nowhere, exactly where he wanted it. No neighbors, no questions, no memories riding in on Sunday mornings with casseroles and sympathy. Tumble lay in the shade of the porch, a blue-gray cattle dog with one ear that never stood upright and eyes that saw everything. Colt had found him 3 years back, half-starved and mean, caught in a trap some idiot had left rusted in the brush. They'd made a deal without words. I won't ask where you came from, you don't ask where I'm going. Worked fine for both of them. The dog's head came up sudden, nose working the air. "What is it?" Colt asked, not expecting an answer. Tumble stood, hackles rising along his spine. A low sound rolled out of his chest, not a growl, something worse, something urgent. Then he ran. Not the usual trot toward a rabbit or the lazy lope after shadows. This was full out, ears pinned, the kind of running that said now, right now, no time. He hit the ridge trail and disappeared over the crest before Colt could call him back. Colt swore, grabbed his rifle from inside the door, and followed. The ridge trail was all loose shale and switchbacks, the kind of path that punished mistakes. Colt climbed fast, his boots finding purchase where the stone allowed, rifle slung across his back. His breath came hard. He wasn't old, 34 wasn't old, but the years had piled weight on him anyway, the kind you couldn't see in a mirror. Tumble's barking echoed off the canyon walls, sharp and insistent. Colt crested the ridge and stopped. The dog stood 50 yards out, circling something in the dirt. Even from a distance, Colt could see the color, dark red against pale dust, too much of it, spreading like a stain that wouldn't wash. He moved forward, rifle ready, scanning the rocks for ambush. Bandits worked these hills sometimes, and worse things than bandits. But there was nothing, just wind, stone, and the relentless sun hammering down on a girl who wasn't moving. She lay on her side, one arm flung out like she'd tried to catch herself. Her dress, what was left of it, had been calico once, blue flowers on white cotton, the kind young women wore to church socials. Now it was shredded, filthy, soaked black-red across the bodice. Her feet were bare, torn bloody from running. Rope burns circled both wrists, raw and weeping. And high on her left shoulder, just below the collarbone, was a bullet hole. Colt dropped to one knee beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her throat. Pulse. Faint, thready, but there. "Jesus," he whispered. Her eyes cracked open, just a sliver, unfocused, the color of winter creek water. Her lips moved. "Don't," she breathed. "Don't. Take me back." Then she was gone again, consciousness slipping away like water through fingers. Colt looked up at the sky, at the buzzards still circling, waiting for nature to finish the job men had started. He looked at Tumble, who sat perfectly still now, watching him with those unblinking eyes. "All right," Colt said quietly. "All right." He shrugged out of his coat, wrapped it around her carefully, and lifted. She weighed nothing, 90 pounds soaking wet, maybe less. He could feel her ribs through the fabric, the sharp edges of a body that had been starved as much as shot. Her head lolled against his shoulder, hair matted with blood and dirt. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a promise the sky might actually keep this time. Colt started walking. Tumble ranged ahead, checking the trail, and together they descended into the gorge as the first cold drops began to fall. He kicked the cabin door open and carried her straight to his bed, the only bed, a narrow cornhusk mattress that hadn't been made in a week. He laid her down gentle, peeled back the coat, and assessed the damage by lamplight. The bullet had gone clean through, which was the only piece of luck she'd had. Entry wound high on the front, exit slightly lower on the back, missing the lung by inches. But the bleeding hadn't stopped. An infection in a wound like this could kill just as sure as the bullet. Colt built up the fire, set water to boil, and pulled out the old ammunition box he kept under the sideboard. Inside, needle and catgut, a bottle of whiskey that had never been for drinking, clean cotton rags boiled so many times they were soft as silk, and a folding scalpel he hoped he wouldn't need. He washed his hands, both of them, even the ruined one, and went to work. She woke twice while he cleaned the wound. The first time she screamed, a raw sound that tore at something in his chest he thought he'd buried. The second time she just wept, silent tears tracking through the dust on her face. "I know," Colt said quietly, stitching the exit wound with steady hands. "I know it hurts. Almost done." When he finished, he bandaged her tight, dressed her in one of his old shirts, and covered her with every blanket he owned. Then he sat in the chair by the fire, rifle across his knees, and watched the door. Tumble curled at the foot of the bed, nose pointed toward the girl, keeping guard. Outside, the rain came down hard, washing blood from stone, filling the gorge with the sound of water that might never be clean enough. She slept for 2 days. Colt kept the fire going, changed her bandages when the bleeding soaked through, and dribbled water between her lips whenever she'd take it. He didn't sleep much himself, couldn't. Every sound outside, wind in the eaves, coyotes on the ridge, the creak of settling timber, put him on edge. Whoever had done this to her might come looking. On the third morning, her eyes opened and stayed that way. Colt was at the stove, frying eggs in bacon grease, when he heard her move. He turned, spatula still in hand, and found her sitting up, pale as winter ash, staring at him with those gray-green eyes. "Easy," he said. "You lost a lot of blood." She looked down at herself, his shirt hanging loose, bandages visible at the collar, her hands resting on the quilt like she didn't quite trust them. Then she looked at Tumble, who wagged once, cautious. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, scraped raw. "My place. Raven Gorge, about 15 miles south of the Sweetwater." "How long?" 3 days. She closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she might pass out again. But when they reopened, there was something harder in them, something that had made decisions. "They'll come," she said. "Who?" She didn't answer right away, just pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders and stared at the fire like it might have answers the world didn't. "Men who think they own things," she said finally, "things that don't belong to them." Colt turned off the stove, set the spatula down, and walked over. He didn't sit on the bed, that felt like too much, but he crouched beside it, meeting her eyes at level. "I'm going to ask you 3 questions," he said. "You don't have to answer any of them. But if you do, I need the truth. Understood?" She nodded. "What's your name?" Mara Quinn." "Who shot you?" Her jaw tightened. "Man named Danner Crow. Runs a ranch north of here, up near the Montana line. Big operation. Cattle, horses." She paused. "Girls." Colt's expression didn't change, but something cold slid down his spine. "Girls," he repeated. "He buys them, trades for them, takes them when nobody's looking, keeps them in a bunkhouse behind the main ranch, says they're working off debts or contracts or whatever lie makes it sound legal." She met his eyes. "I was traded. My father owed money. Crow offered to clear the debt if I came to work for him. I was 17. Didn't have a choice." "How long?" 3 years. 3 years. Colt's hands curled into fists, the ruined one aching. "And the bullet?" "I ran." Her voice was flat now, empty. Took a horse, rode hard, thought I could make it to Fort Casper, maybe find a marshal who gave a damn. Crow's men caught me 10 miles out, dragged me back. Crow said I needed to learn. She touched the bandage at her shoulder. So he taught me. Then he told his men to tie me up, take me out past the ridge, and let the prairie finish what he started. Silence settled over the cabin like snow. Colt stood slowly, walked to the window, and looked out at the gorge. The sky was clear now, scrubbed blue, innocent. Last question, he said without turning around. What do you want to do? I want to disappear, Mara said quietly. I want to vanish so completely that Danner Crow spends the rest of his life wondering if I'm dead or if I'm out there somewhere, waiting. I want him to never sleep right again. Colt turned back. That's not disappearing. That's war. Then I want war. He studied her for a long moment, this half-dead girl in his shirt, with rope burns on her wrists and a bullet hole in her shoulder, asking for the one thing he'd spent 5 years trying to avoid. Then he nodded. All right, he said, but first you eat, you heal, and you get strong. Because if Crow comes, and I think he will, you're going to need to stand on your own 2 feet. Agreed? Agreed. Colt went back to the stove, cracked 4 more eggs into the pan, and started cooking. Tumble padded over to Mara, rested his chin on the edge of the bed, and let her scratch behind his ears. He found you, Colt said over his shoulder. On the ridge. Came and got me. Mara looked down at the dog, at the crooked ear and the scarred muzzle, and the eyes that had seen enough to stop trusting easy. Thank you, she whispered. Tumble's tail wagged twice. Outside, a crow landed on the fence post and cawed once, harsh and mocking, before flying west toward the mountains. Over the next week, Mara healed in inches. Colt changed her bandages every morning and evening, his touch clinical, efficient, careful not to meet her eyes while his hands worked. The wound was clean, no infection, no fever, but it would scar. A puckered star on the front, a ragged exit on the back, permanent reminders that someone had tried to erase her and failed. She didn't talk much at first, just watched. Watched Colt split wood with methodical precision despite the missing fingers. Watched him cook, clean, mend tack, oil the rifle he kept by the door. Watched the way Tumble shadowed him everywhere, a silent partnership built on something deeper than commands. On the 4th day, she stood, wobbly, pale, but upright. On the 5th, she walked to the porch and back. On the 6th, she asked for real clothes. Colt dug through an old trunk and found a pair of canvas trousers he'd outgrown, a flannel shirt that had been his brother's, and a belt that she had to punch 2 new holes in to make fit. She dressed behind the hanging quilt he'd rigged for privacy, and when she emerged, she looked like a ranch hand's kid brother, small, lean, drowned in fabric. Better, she said. You'll need boots, Colt replied. Can't do much barefoot. I had boots. They took them. I'll ride into town tomorrow. Get you a pair. No. He looked up from the harness he was mending. I'm not letting you spend money on me, Mara said. I'll work it off, however long it takes. You can't work with a hole in your shoulder. Then I'll work when I can. She crossed her arms, wincing slightly at the pull. I'm not charity, Mr. Harlan. I'm not some broken thing you found that you get to fix and feel good about. I pay my debts. Colt set down the harness. I didn't ask for payment. I know. That's why I'm offering. They stared at each other across the cabin. 2 people who'd learned the hard way that kindness usually came with conditions, that debts were weapons, that trust was the fastest way to get hurt. Finally, Colt nodded. All right, but the boots come first. Work comes after you can stand a full day without going white. Deal. That night, after Mara had fallen asleep in the bed and Colt had settled into his usual chair by the fire, Tumble came and sat at his feet. The dog looked up at him with those unreadable eyes. I know, Colt murmured. I know this is a bad idea. Tumble's tail thumped once against the floor. She's going to bring trouble right to the door. Another thump. And we're going to let her stay anyway, aren't we? The dog yawned, showing every tooth, then curled up by the hearth and closed his eyes. Colt leaned back, rifle across his lap, and watched the darkness press against the windows. Somewhere out there, north of here, A man named Danner Crow was probably sitting in a big house, drinking expensive whiskey, certain that the girl who'd run was rotting in the sage by now. Let him think that. Let him sleep easy. Because when the truth came for him, and Colt had a feeling it would, the way all debts eventually came due, it was going to have teeth. Oh, the stranger appeared on the 8th day. Colt saw him from the ridge while checking the fence line. A single rider, moving slow, trailing the creek bed from the north. He sat tall in the saddle, dark hat pulled low, and even from a distance there was something deliberate about the way he moved. Not lost, not passing through, looking. Colt whistled low. Tumble materialized from the brush, hackles already rising. "Home," Colt said quietly. "Now." They moved fast, cutting through the ravine trail, boots and paws finding the path by memory. By the time they hit the valley floor, Colt could see the cabin, and Mara, hanging laundry on the line he'd strung between two posts, moving careful but steady. "Inside," he called. She turned, saw his face, and didn't argue. The laundry dropped. She was through the door in 5 seconds. Colt reached the cabin, grabbed the rifle, checked the load. 6 rounds. He had more ammunition in the sideboard, but 6 would have to be enough for whatever this was. "Who is it?" Mara asked from the window, staying low like he'd taught her. "Don't know yet." The rider came into the clearing slow, hands visible, reins loose. He stopped 30 feet from the porch and tipped his hat back just enough to show his face. Weathered, 40-something, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. "Afternoon," he called. Colt stepped onto the porch, rifle held casual but ready. "Help you?" "Looking for a girl." The rider's voice was calm, almost friendly. "Young, dark hair, about this tall." He held his hand level with his shoulder. "Ran off from the Crow Ranch week or so back. Boss is offering a reward for information." "Haven't seen anyone," Colt said. The rider smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's funny. 'Cause I tracked a horse this direction. Lost the trail in the rain, but the last clear prints pointed straight at this gorge. Lot of horses use this trail." Sure they do." The rider shifted in his saddle, gaze sliding past Colt to the cabin windows. "Mind if I water my horse? Long ride out here." "Trough's over there." Colt nodded toward the far side of the yard. "Help yourself." The man dismounted, led his horse to the trough, and let it drink. But his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging the cabin, the barn, the laundry still scattered in the dirt, every detail filed away. "Nice place you got here," he said. "Quiet." "That's the idea." "Live alone?" "That's my business." The rider straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Look, friend, I don't want trouble, just doing a job. If the girl came through here, all you gotta do is say so. Crow will pay fair, and we all go home happy." "And if I did see her?" Colt asked. "What then?" "Then we collect her, take her back where she belongs, and everybody forgets this happened." "Where she belongs?" "She's under contract, signed legal. Crow's got the papers." Colt's finger rested light on the trigger guard. "A lot of things are legal, doesn't make them right." The rider's smile faded. He looked at Colt for a long moment, taking in the rifle, the scars, the hard set of a man who had decided something and wasn't going to move. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Wouldn't be my first." The man mounted up, turned his horse. "Crow's patient, but he doesn't forget. You think about that." He rode out the way he'd come, slow and easy, disappearing into the sage. Colt stood on the porch until the hoofbeats faded completely. Then he went inside, locked the door, and pulled the shutters closed on every window. Mara sat at the table, hands folded, face pale. "He knows," she said. "He suspects." "It's the same thing." Colt set the rifle on the table, sat down across from her. "Then we prepare. Because suspicion is one thing, proof is another, and they don't have proof unless they come through that door." "And if they do?" He met her eyes. Winter Creek water meeting stone. "Then they better come hard," he said, "because I don't plan on losing." Mara nodded slowly. Outside, Tumble barked once, sharp, certain, and silence settled over Raven Gorge like the drawing of a breath before the first shot. The barking stopped. Colt waited, counting heartbeats until Tumble's nails clicked across the porch boards. 3 measured steps, then silence. The all-clear signal they'd developed without planning, the way survival teaches language faster than any schoolhouse. Mara exhaled slowly, fingers still gripped white around the table edge. "How long do we have?" she asked. Colt stood, moved to the window, and eased the shutter open just enough to scan the ridgeline. Empty. Nothing but sage and stone, and the late afternoon sun turning everything gold. "A day, maybe 2. He'll ride back to Crow, report what he found, or didn't find. Then Crow will decide if it's worth the trouble to come himself. It will be." Mara's voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd learned a man's pride the hard way. "He doesn't let things go, especially things he thinks he owns." Colt turned from the window. "Then we make it cost him. Make it so expensive he has to think twice. You can't fight them all. Crow's got 15, maybe 20 men. Don't need to fight them all." Colt pulled the ammunition box from under the sideboard and started laying out shells on the table, rifle rounds, pistol cartridges, enough to hold a siege if it came to that. Just need to make the first few hurt bad enough the rest lose their appetite. Mara watched him work, this stranger with ruined hands and eyes that had seen things he wouldn't talk about. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't look up. "Doing what?" "Helping me. You don't know me. You don't owe me. You could have left me on that ridge and nobody would have blamed you." Colt's hand stilled over the cartridges. For a long moment he didn't answer, just stared at the bullets like they held answers to questions he'd stopped asking years ago. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost lost under the crackle of the fire. "Had a sister once. Rebecca. She was 16 when a cattle baron up in Montana decided she'd make a good second wife. Didn't ask her, didn't ask our family, just made an offer to my father. Cash, land, debt forgiveness. My father took it." The words came slow, each one costing something. "Becky ran, made it almost to the territorial line before they caught her, brought her back, married her in front of the whole county. Legal, proper, signed papers and everything." Mara's throat tightened. "What happened to her?" "She lasted 8 months. Then one morning they found her in the river. Said she slipped, hit her head on the rocks." He met Mara's eyes. Her face was so busted up they had to bury her with the casket closed. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. "I'm sorry," Mara whispered. "Me too." Colt went back to organizing ammunition. "So when Tumble found you bleeding in the dirt, and you told me not to take you back, I heard Becky's voice, and I made a choice I didn't get to make the first time." Mara nodded slowly, understanding settling into her bones. This wasn't charity. This wasn't kindness. This was a man trying to balance accounts with a past that wouldn't stay buried. "Then we'd better make sure I survive it," she said. "Teach me." Colt looked up. "Teach you what?" "Everything. How to shoot, how to fight, how to make them bleed." She stood, steadier now than she'd been an hour ago. "You said I needed to stand on my own feet, so teach me how to stand in a way that makes them think twice about knocking me down." Something shifted in Colt's expression, not quite a smile, but close to it. "You ever fired a gun before?" "Once. My brother's old rifle. Kicked so hard I thought my shoulder broke. Then we start tomorrow morning, first light. And Mara." He waited until she met his eyes. "When you pull that trigger, you better mean it. Because the men coming for you won't hesitate, and if you do, you're dead." "I won't hesitate," she said, and somewhere in the set of her jaw, in the way her hands had stopped shaking, Colt believed her. That night Mara took the chair by the fire, insisting Colt use the bed for once. He argued, but not hard. His back had been screaming for days, and pride only carried a man so far. He lay down on top of the quilt, boots still on, rifle within arm's reach, and listened to the night sounds beyond the walls. Coyotes on the ridge, wind in the eaves, the slow creak of timber settling, and underneath it all, Mara's breathing, steady and deliberate, the sound of someone forcing themselves to stay calm when every instinct screamed to run. "Mr. Harlan," her voice was soft, almost lost in the darkness. "Colt, just Colt." "Colt, then. A pause. You ever regret it? Coming out here, living alone, cutting yourself off from everything? He stared at the ceiling beams, at the shadows dancing across rough-hewn wood. Every day, and never. That doesn't make sense. Not much does anymore. Silence stretched between them, comfortable somehow, the quiet understanding of two people who'd both learned that loneliness was safer than trust. I had a dog once, Mara said finally, before Crow. A little mutt named Pepper. She followed me everywhere, slept at the foot of my bed, waited by the door every evening when I came in from the fields. Her voice tightened. When my father told me I was going to the Crow Ranch, I tried to bring her. He said no. Said Crow wouldn't want a useless mouth to feed, so I left her with my brother, made him promise to take care of her. You ever hear what happened to her? No. My brother stopped writing after the first year. Maybe he got tired of me asking about a dog. Maybe he just got tired of me. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. When Tumble found me on that ridge, for just a second I thought maybe it was Pepper. Stupid, I know. But I thought maybe somehow she'd come to take me home. Colt rolled onto his side, looking across the dim cabin to where she sat outlined by firelight. She did. Just took a different shape. Mara's silhouette nodded. Yeah, maybe. Tumble, sleeping between them on the floor, twitched in his dreams, paws running, chasing something only he could see. Dawn came cold and clear, turning the gorge into shades of gray and silver. Colt was already up, building the fire back to life, when Mara stirred. She moved stiff, favoring the wounded shoulder, but she moved. Coffee first, Colt said, pouring 2 tin cups from the pot he'd set to boil. Then breakfast, then we work. They ate fried cornmeal mush with the last of the bacon grease, not talking, just fueling up like ranch hands before a hard day. When the plates were clean, Colt led her outside to the clearing behind the cabin. He'd set up a row of tin cans on a fallen log 20 paces out. 5 targets, rusted and dented from previous practice. The morning sun caught them, turning cheap metal into something almost gold. This is a Colt single-action army, he said, pulling the revolver from his belt. 6 rounds, .45 caliber. Kick like a mule if you don't respect it, but it'll put a man down and keep him there. He handed it to her grip first. Feel the weight. Mara took it, surprised by how heavy it was. The metal was cold, unforgiving, real in a way nothing else had been for days. Now, stance. Colt moved behind her, not touching, just guiding with words. Feet shoulder width, knees soft. Weight forward on the balls of your feet. You lock your knees and the recoil will knock you flat. Good. Now bring the gun up. 2 hands, support hand wrapped over your strong hand, thumbs forward, not crossed. That's it. Mara raised the pistol, arms shaking slightly. Breathe, Colt said. In through your nose, out through your mouth, slow. The gun doesn't care if you're scared. It only cares if you're steady. She breathed. In, out, in, out. The shaking eased. Sight picture. Line up the front sight between the rear notches. Put that front sight on the target, middle of the can. Don't yank the trigger. Squeeze it. Gentle, like you're holding something that might break if you rush. Mara squeezed. The gun roared, bucked hard against her palms. The bullet went wide, kicking up dirt 3 feet to the right of the log. Again, Colt said. She fired, wide left. Again, wide high. Again. The 4th shot clipped the edge of the log, sending splinters flying. The 5th went God knew where. The sixth hit the second can dead center, punching through with a sharp clang that echoed off the canyon walls. Mara lowered the pistol, breathing hard, shoulder screaming where the wound pulled. Not bad, Colt said. For a first-timer. I missed 5 out of 6. And you hit 1. That's 1 more than most people manage their first day. He took the gun, reloaded it with practiced efficiency. But here's the truth, Mara. When Crow's men come, and they will come, you won't get 6 shots. You'll be scared, moving, maybe bleeding. You'll get 1 chance, maybe 2, to make them stop. So that 1 shot you hit? That's the one you need to find every single time. He handed the gun back. Again. They worked through the morning, pausing only when Mara's hand started shaking too badly to hold steady. Colt never raised his voice, never showed impatience, just corrected and encouraged and corrected again. By noon, she'd gone through 50 rounds and could hit 3 cans out of 6 consistently. Better, Colt said. We'll work pistol every morning, rifle every afternoon. 2 weeks, maybe 3, you'll be dangerous. We don't have 3 weeks. Then you'll be dangerous faster. They walked back to the cabin, Tumble trailing behind, nose working the ground for rabbits. Mara flexed her hands, feeling blisters forming on her palms. Thank you, she said. Colt shrugged. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're still breathing at the end of this. That afternoon, while Mara rested and Colt worked on reinforcing the cabin shutters, a rider appeared on the north ridge. Different man this time. Younger, wearing a tan duster and a hat with a silver band that caught the light. He didn't come down into the valley, just sat his horse on the ridgeline for maybe 10 minutes, looking, then turned and rode away. Colt watched from the window, jaw tight. They're watching, Mara said from the bed. Yeah. How many, you think? 2 so far. Probably got more circling, checking trails, asking questions in town. So we're surrounded? No. Colt let the shutter fall closed. We're fortified. There's a difference. Over the next 3 days, the pattern repeated. Different riders, different times, always staying just beyond rifle range, watching, cataloging, reporting back. Colt counted 5 distinct men, which meant Crow had committed serious resources to this. Good. Let him waste time and money. Every day Mara got stronger was a day they gained. The training continued. Pistol at dawn, rifle at midday, hand to hand in the evening when the light started to fail. Colt taught her how to use elbows, knees, how to go for eyes and throat when size and strength weren't on your side. He showed her pressure points, vulnerable spots, ways to turn a man's weight against him. You're never going to outmuscle them, he said, demonstrating a wrist lock that brought Mara to her knees despite her resistance. So you outthink them. Be meaner, faster, willing to do what they hesitate to do. Like what? He released her, stepped back. Like whatever it takes to go home standing up. On the 4th night, Colt woke to Tumble's low growl. The dog stood at the door, hackles raised, staring at something in the darkness beyond. Colt was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. What is it? Tumble's growl deepened. Mara sat up, automatically reaching for the pistol Colt had given her to keep by the bed. Someone outside? Stay here. Colt eased the door open, rifle up, scanning the yard. Moonlight painted everything silver and black, all harsh angles and deep shadows. Nothing moved, but Tumble was never wrong. Then he smelled it. Smoke. Not wood smoke from the chimney, something chemical, acrid, wrong. He ran toward the doghouse, the small shelter he'd built for Tumble years back, though the dog rarely used it. Flames licked up the sides, orange and hungry, fed by something that burned too fast, too hot to be natural. Kerosene. Colt grabbed the water bucket by the trough and doused the flames before they could spread. The doghouse collapsed into charred timber, still smoking. Mara appeared at his shoulder, pistol raised, scanning the darkness. Where are they? Gone. Colt kicked at the smoldering wreckage. This wasn't about fighting, this was about sending a message. What message? That they can reach us whenever they want, that nowhere is safe. He looked at the ridgeline, at the shadows that might be rocks or might be men. It's a siege tactic. Make us scared, make us careless. Is it working? Colt met her eyes. No, but it tells me Crow's getting impatient, and impatient men make mistakes. They spent the rest of the night watching from the cabin, taking shifts, waiting for the next move. But nothing came. Just wind and stars, and the slow burn of adrenaline fading into exhaustion. At dawn, Mara found something nailed to the fence post. A piece of paper, water-stained and torn, with 6 words written in rough pencil. Send her out or burn together. She brought it inside without comment, handed it to Colt. He read it twice, then fed it to the fire. Well? Mara asked. Well, what? What do we do? Colt pulled on his coat, checked his rifle, and headed for the door. We get ready, because talking time is over. They spent the day turning the ranch into a fortress. Colt dug shallow pits around the cabin perimeter, covering them with brush. ankle breakers that would take a running man down hard. He strung wire across the approach trails at throat height, invisible in the dark. He soaked rags in kerosene and stashed them in strategic locations with matches nearby. If they wanted fire, they'd get fire. Mara worked alongside him despite the pull in her shoulder, digging, hauling, learning. Colt showed her the 3 escape routes he'd mapped years ago. A drainage ditch that ran to the creek, a rock chimney that led to the ridge, a tunnel he'd started under the barn floor but never finished. "If things go bad," he said, "you take one of these and you run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Get to Fort Casper, find the marshal, tell him everything." "What about you?" "I'll buy you time." "No." Mara stopped digging, leaned on the shovel. "We fight together or we run together. I'm not leaving you to die for me." "Mara, no." Her voice was steel now, tempered by days of practice and nights of fear transformed into fury. "You saved my life. You taught me to fight. You gave me a chance when the whole world said I wasn't worth the trouble. So don't you dare ask me to run while you stand alone. We're in this together now, and together is how we see it through." Colt looked at this girl, this woman, standing in his yard with blistered hands and a loaded pistol on her hip, defying him with the same stubborn courage his sister never got the chance to use. And for the first time in 5 years, something in his chest that had been frozen solid started to crack. "All right," he said quietly. "Together." They worked until full dark, then collapsed inside, too tired to do more than eat cold beans from the can and drink water that tasted like iron and dust. "How many, you think?" Mara asked, cleaning her pistol by lamplight the way Colt had taught her. "When they come." 6, maybe 8. Enough to make sure, not enough to split the reward too many ways. "And we're 2. 2.5. Colt nodded toward Tumble, who raised his head at the mention. "Dog's worth at least half a man in a fight." Mara smiled despite everything. "Good odds." "Terrible odds." "Then we'd better be twice as mean." Colt almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he checked his rifle for the 100th time, making sure every mechanism worked smooth. Every round was seated right. This was it. The waiting was almost over. Soon Crow would make his move, and they'd find out if all the preparation, all the training, all the bravado was worth a damn when bullets started flying. "Colt?" Mara's voice was soft. "Yeah? If we don't make it, we'll make it. But if we don't, I need you to know something." She set down the pistol, met his eyes across the table. "I've spent 3 years feeling like I died the day my father sold me, like I was just walking around waiting for my body to figure it out. But these past 2 weeks, fighting with you, learning to be strong again, I feel alive. Scared, yeah, but alive. And whatever happens tomorrow or the next day, you gave me that. So thank you. For real this time." Colt swallowed hard, words sticking in his throat like burrs. "You gave me something too." "What?" "A reason to care if I wake up tomorrow." The lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain that might finally fall. And in the distance, so faint it could have been imagination, came the sound of horses moving in the dark. Tumble's ears pricked forward. Colt stood, rifle in hand, moving to the window. 8 riders came down the valley trail in a loose line, silhouettes against the moonlit sky. They stopped at the edge of the clearing just beyond rifle range, and one man rode forward alone. Even from 50 yards, even in the dark, Colt could see the way he sat his horse, like a king surveying property he already owned. Danner Crow had come calling. The man who rode forward carried himself like he'd never been told no in his life. Broad shoulders, expensive coat, a hat that cost more than most men made in a month. Even in the moonlight, Colt could see the confidence radiating off him, the kind that came from owning land, cattle, and people who couldn't say otherwise. Danner Crow reined his horse 20 yards from the porch and sat there, taking in the cabin, the fortifications, the way Colt stood in the doorway with a rifle that hadn't wavered an inch. "Evening," Crow called out, voice smooth as whiskey. "You must be the man playing hero." Colt didn't answer. "I'm looking for property that belongs to me. Young woman, dark hair, about yay high. Answers to Mara Quinn, though she's been known to lie about that." Crow leaned forward in his saddle, casual. I've got legal papers saying she's contracted to me for another 2 years. Law's on my side, friend. So why don't you send her out? We'll settle her debts, and you can go back to whatever lonely existence you had before you stuck your nose where it doesn't belong. She's not property, Colt said quietly, and she's not going anywhere. Crow smiled, but it was the kind of smile predators wore before they struck. See, that's where you're wrong. She signed a contract. Her father signed a contract. Both parties agreed. That makes it legal, binding, and absolutely none of your concern. Contract signed under duress isn't legal. Says who? You? Crow laughed, the sound carrying across the clearing. You're nobody. You're some crippled rancher living in the ass end of nowhere with a half-dead dog and delusions of righteousness. I've got judges, marshals, half the territorial government in my pocket. Who do you think they'll believe? From inside the cabin, Mara moved to the window, pistol gripped tight. Colt could feel her there, a presence at his back, solid and ready. Doesn't matter who they believe, Colt said. She's not leaving. Crow's expression hardened. You're making this difficult for no reason. I've been patient. I've given you opportunities to do the smart thing, but my patience has limits, friend, and you're pushing them real hard right now. I'm not your friend. No. Crow straightened in his saddle. No, you're not. You're an obstacle. And I deal with obstacles the same way I deal with everything else that gets in my way. I remove them. He turned his horse, started to ride back toward his men, then stopped. I'm going to give you until dawn to think about this. Sunrise, you send the girl out, we leave peaceful. But if that door stays closed, we're coming through it. And friend, he looked back over his shoulder. When we do, there won't be enough left of you to bury. The 8 riders turned as one and melted back into the darkness, disappearing like smoke. Colt stood on the porch until the hoofbeats faded completely, then stepped inside and barred the door. Mara stood by the table, face pale but composed. That was him. Yeah. He's not bluffing. No, he's not. Colt set the rifle down, pulled out his revolver, and started checking the cylinder. He'll hit us at dawn. Maybe before if he thinks we're sleeping. Won't be subtle about it either. He'll burn us out or shoot through the walls until there's nothing left. So what do we do? Colt looked at her standing there in clothes too big, hands that had learned to kill in less than 2 weeks, eyes that had seen the worst humanity offered and still chose to fight. We make it cost him everything. They spent the next hours preparing. Colt moved through the cabin like a man cataloging a life, touching things he'd lived with for 5 years. The chair by the fire, the table his brother built, the rifle that had belonged to his father, everything he'd kept when he ran from the world, all the small pieces of a past he couldn't quite let go. You should take what matters, Mara said softly. In case nothing. It's just things. But he pulled his brother's pocket knife from the drawer anyway, slipped it into his coat. Most of what mattered burned a long time ago. Mara loaded every gun they had, 2 rifles, 3 pistols, a shotgun Colt kept for close work. She laid them out on the table with ammunition beside each one, creating a small arsenal that looked impressive until you remembered they'd be facing 8 men who did this for a living. Tell me the plan, she said. Colt moved to the crude map he'd sketched on the back of an old wanted poster. They'll come from multiple directions, probably 2 from the north trail, 2 from the creek bed, another 2 circling to the south. Crow and 1 other will hang back, directing. Standard assault pattern for overwhelming a fixed position. And us? We don't defend, we attack. Colt traced lines on the map. I'll take the north approach, catch them in the wire traps. You hold the cabin, cover the south and east angles. Tumble watches the west. Anyone makes it through the outer perimeter, you make them regret it. Mara studied the map, seeing the gaps, the impossible odds, the dozen ways this ended with both of them dead. That's not a plan. That's suicide. You got a better idea? Yeah, we run. Take the drainage tunnel to the creek, follow it to the main road, get to Fort Casper before they realize we're gone. Colt shook his head. They'll track us. 2 people on foot can't outrun 8 on horseback. We'd make maybe 5 miles before they ran us down. Then we split up. You go north, I go south. Make them choose. No. The word came out harder than Colt intended. We fight together. You said it yourself. I also said I'm not letting you die for me. Then don't. Colt grabbed her shoulders, not rough but firm enough to make her meet his eyes. Don't let me die. Fight like hell, shoot straight, and we both walk out of this breathing. That's the plan. That's the only plan that matters. Mara searched his face, seeing the scars and the grief and the stubborn determination of a man who'd already lost everyone he cared about and refused to do it again. Slowly, she nodded. Together, she whispered. Together. They checked the fortifications one last time. The wire traps were strung tight, invisible in the pre-dawn darkness. The kerosene rags were positioned near the approach trails, ready to create walls of fire. The escape routes were clear. Every gun was loaded, every blade was sharp. Colt stood on the porch as the sky began to gray, watching the east horizon. Beside him, Tumble sat perfectly still, ears forward, reading the darkness with senses humans had lost generations ago. You feel that? Colt murmured. The dog's hackles rose. Yeah, me too. The attack came from the south. No warning. No final chance to surrender, just sudden muzzle flash and the crack of rifle fire punching through the pre-dawn quiet. Bullets chewed into the cabin walls, shattering one window, splintering the doorframe 6 inches from where Colt had been standing a second before. He dove inside, rolling to the wall. South side, 3, maybe 4! Mara was already at the south window, pistol up, tracking movement in the gray light. She saw a figure running toward the barn and fired twice. The first shot went wide. The second caught him in the leg, spinning him down into the dirt where he lay screaming. More gunfire erupted from the north. Colt crawled to the opposite window, thrust the rifle barrel through, and fired at the muzzle flashes. Someone yelled, the voice cutting off sharp. Hit or pin, Colt couldn't tell. They're spreading out, Mara shouted over the gunfire. Trying to surround us. Let them try, Colt fired again, working the lever, brass casing spinning through the air. Just keep them off the walls. A man broke from cover near the creek, running hard for the cabin's blind spot on the east side. Tumble launched from the porch like a gray missile, snarling, and hit the runner at full speed. They went down in a tangle of teeth and thrashing limbs. The man screamed, trying to bring his pistol around, but Tumble had his gun arm in those powerful jaws and wasn't letting go. Colt put a round into the dirt beside them. Call your dog off, or the next one's in your skull. The man went still. Tumble dragged him backward by the arm, never releasing his grip, hauling him away from the cabin like a wolf with prey. Good boy, Colt muttered, then turned back to the window as more bullets ripped through the morning air. The fight settled into a brutal rhythm. Advance, fire, retreat, reload. Crow's men were professionals, moving with coordination, using cover, trying to work close enough to rush the cabin. But every approach met bullets or traps or Tumble's teeth, and slowly, reluctantly, they pulled back to regroup. In the brief silence that followed, Colt counted casualties. 1 man down from Mara's shot, still moaning in the dirt. 1 disabled by Tumble, crawling toward the tree line with a mangled arm. At least 1 more hit, judging by the blood trail leading into the sage. That's 3, Mara said, reloading with hands that barely shook. 5 left, plus Crow. They'll come again, harder this time. Let them. Colt looked at her crouched by the window, face smudged with powder smoke, eyes hard as winter stone, and saw what Danner Crow had tried to break and failed. This wasn't the half-dead girl Tumble had found bleeding in the dust. This was someone who'd crawled through hell and come out forged into something that cut back. The second assault came fast and mean. 2 men rushed the north side while 3 opened fire from the south, pouring lead into the cabin in a coordinated barrage meant to keep heads down. Colt heard wood splintering, glass breaking, bullets punching through the walls close enough to feel the air move. He rolled to the north window, saw the runners closing fast. 20 yards. 15. He fired, levered, fired again. The lead man dropped, clutching his chest. The second dove behind the water trough and returned fire, bullets sparking off the iron stove. Mara's pistol roared from the south side. Got one! 2 left on this angle. Watch the east, Colt shouted, reloading. They're trying to flank. The door exploded inward, torn half off its hinges by a shotgun blast. A man stepped through the smoke, leveling his weapon for a second shot. Colt didn't think, just moved. He threw himself sideways as the shotgun roared again, pellets shredding the wall where he'd been. His rifle came up and he fired from the hip, pure instinct, and the shotgunner went down like someone had cut his strings. But the door was open now, the barrier breached. Mara spun, saw the danger, and made a decision. She grabbed the kerosene lamp from the table and hurled it at the doorway. Glass shattered, fuel splashed across the threshold, and when Colt fired a round into the spreading pool, it ignited with a whoosh that sent flames racing up the doorframe. "Back door!" Colt yelled, grabbing her arm. "Move!" They ran through the cabin's interior as fire began to eat the front wall. Colt kicked open the back door and they spilled into the narrow space behind the cabin, where the drainage ditch offered cover and an escape route if they needed it. But Mara pulled away from him, turning back. "The guns! We can't leave!" "Forget them!" Colt grabbed the shotgun the dead man had dropped, checked the loads. 2 shells left. Better than nothing. "We've got what we need! Now run!" They ran along the ditch toward the rocks, bullets kicking up dirt at their heels. Tumble materialized from somewhere, pacing them, blood on his muzzle but still moving strong. The cabin was fully engulfed now, flames reaching for the sky, black smoke billowing across the clearing. Colt led them to an outcropping 50 yards out, a natural fortress of stone that offered cover and high ground. They scrambled up, breathing hard, and turned to face the burning cabin. Through the smoke and flames, Danner Crow sat his horse, watching his men regroup. 4 left standing, 3 dead or 2 wounded to fight. The arithmetic was shifting. Crow saw them in the rocks and raised his voice to Carrie. "You can't run forever, Harlan. This territory's mine. Every trail, every town, every rock you hide behind. I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth before I let you make me look weak." Colt aimed the shotgun at Crow's center mass, finger on the trigger. 1 shot. He could end this right now. But 60 yards was long for a shotgun, and if he missed, Crow would disappear and they'd never get another chance this clean. Mara must have read his thoughts. Not yet. We need to see his face when we beat him." Colt lowered the gun fractionally. "We're not exactly winning." "We're still breathing. That's winning." Below, Crow issued orders Colt couldn't hear. The 4 remaining men spread out, moving to surround the outcropping. Professional, methodical, inevitable. "We can't hold this position," Mara said quietly. "Not against 4 coming from different angles." "I know. So what do we do?" Colt looked at the burning cabin, at everything he owned turning to ash and ember. 5 years of solitude, of trying to forget, of pretending he didn't care about anything or anyone. All of it gone in 20 minutes of gunfire and flame. And somehow, impossibly, he felt lighter. "We stop defending," he said. "We take the fight to them." He pointed to the north ridge, where the wire traps still waited. "I'm going to lead them through there, get them tangled, whittle the numbers. You circle south, get above them, take shots when they're focused on me. Tumble stays with you, watches your back." "That's insane." "You got a better idea?" Mara opened her mouth, closed it. "No, damn it, no I don't." "Then on 3, we split. Don't hesitate, don't look back, just move and shoot and trust that I'm doing the same." She grabbed his arm, pulled him around to face her. For a moment they just looked at each other. 2 broken people who'd stumbled into each other's lives by accident and stayed by choice. "Don't die," Mara said fiercely. "Same to you." 1. Colt checked the shotgun loads. 2. Mara gripped her pistol so hard her knuckles went white. 3. They exploded from the rocks in opposite directions. Colt ran north, boots pounding stone, heading for the ridge trail. Behind him, gunfire erupted as Crow's men reacted, but he was already moving, using terrain, putting distance between himself and their guns. He hit the ridge trail at full speed and kept climbing. Behind him, he heard shouts, orders, the sound of men giving chase. Good. Let them follow. Let them think he was running scared. The first wire trap was strung between 2 rocks at shin height. Colt vaulted it clean and kept running. Behind him, someone wasn't so lucky. A man's scream, a heavy crash, cursing. 1 down. The second trap was higher, throat level, meant for a running man. Colt slid under it on his back and came up shooting. The shotgun roared, buckshot shredding the brush where movement had been. Someone grunted, stumbled, but kept coming. Colt didn't wait. He ran deeper into the wire maze, leading them through traps he'd set and memorized. turning their numbers into a liability. Another scream, another curse, the sound of thrashing, someone caught in wire trying to free themselves. Then a voice, Crow's voice, cutting through the chaos. "Forget him! The girl's still in the rocks! Take her alive and Harlan'll surrender!" No, 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 no. Colt reversed direction, running flat out back down the ridge. He burst from the rocks in time to see two men closing on Mara's position from opposite sides, pinning her, cutting off her escape. She fired, dropped one, but the other kept coming, using his partner's fall as cover to close the distance. 10 yards. 5. Colt raised the shotgun, but the angle was wrong. Mara too close, and if he missed, Tumble came out of nowhere, a gray blur of fur and fury hitting the man at the knees. They went down hard, and the dog's jaws found throat, clamped down, and didn't let go even when the man's pistol fired wildly, bullets going everywhere and nowhere. Mara scrambled up, ran to Colt's position. Blood streaked her left arm, grazed, not serious, but bleeding. "You hit? Just a scratch? You?" Still standing. They turned back to back, covering all angles as the remaining men regrouped. Colt counted 2 still mobile plus Crow. 3 against 2. Better odds than they'd started with. But the sun was climbing now, burning off the smoke, revealing their position. No more shadows to hide in. No more tricks. Just open ground and the final reckoning. Danner Crow rode forward alone, stopping 30 yards out. His hat was gone, lost somewhere in the fight. A cut above his eye leaked blood down his face. But his gun hand was steady, and his eyes held the cold fury of a man who'd been defied and wouldn't forgive it. "This is your last chance, Harlan," he shouted. "Send the girl out now and I'll let you live. Keep her and you both burn." Colt jacked around into the rifle he'd retrieved from the cabin ruins. "Come take her, Crow. Let's see how much she's really worth to you." For a long moment nobody moved. The wind died. The world held its breath. Then Crow smiled, a terrible smile, empty of anything human. "All right," he said softly. "Have it your way." He raised his hand and the final assault began. 2 men charged from the left, firing as they came, bullets whining past close enough to hear. Colt dropped to one knee, aimed, fired. One man folded, the other kept coming, reloading on the run. Mara's pistol spoke twice, 3 times. The charging man stumbled, caught himself, raised his weapon. Tumble hit him from the side, jaws closing on his wrist, dragging him down. The man screamed, trying to shake the dog loose, but Tumble had locked on, and nothing short of death would make him release. That left Crow. He dismounted slowly, deliberately, drawing a long-barreled revolver from his belt. Custom piece, engraved, expensive. A rich man's gun. 3 years I kept her, Crow said, walking forward. 3 years I fed her, clothed her, gave her a roof over her head. And this is the gratitude I get. Running, shooting my men, burning my property. She was never your property, Colt said, standing. Everything is my property if I decide it is. Crow stopped 20 feet away. That's how the world works, Harlan. Men like me own. Men like you serve. And girls like her, he looked past Colt to where Mara stood. Girls like her exist to please whoever has the power to take them. Mara stepped forward, pistol raised, arm steady despite the blood, despite the fear, despite everything. I'm not yours, she said clearly. I never was. And when they find your body in the dirt, Danner Crow, they'll know that's true. Crow's face twisted. You ungrateful little... He raised his gun. Mara fired first. The bullet caught Crow high on the right shoulder, spinning him sideways. His shot went wild, kicking dirt 5 feet from its target. He stumbled, caught himself, face contorted with shock and rage. You shot me, he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. You actually... Colt's rifle spoke once. The heavy round took Crow in the chest, punching through expensive coat and flesh and bone, and the man who'd thought he owned the world dropped to his knees in the red Wyoming dust. He looked up at them, blood on his lips, understanding finally reaching his eyes. You don't get to walk away from this, he whispered. Neither do you, Mara said. She walked forward, standing over him, pistol aimed at his head. Crow stared up at her, seeing his death in the face of the girl he'd tried to break. Do it, he rasped. Finish it. Mara's finger tightened on the trigger. For a long moment, the world balanced on that edge. Revenge and justice, death and mercy, the choice that would define who she'd become after today. Then she lowered the gun. "No," she said quietly. "I'm not giving you an easy death. I want you to live. I want you to spend whatever time you have left knowing that a girl you tried to own beat you. That she walked away free while you bled out in the dirt like the nothing you are." She turned her back on him and walked to where Colt stood. Behind them, Danner Crow collapsed forward into the dust, still breathing, but finished, his empire crumbling around him with every fading heartbeat. The remaining gunmen were gone, fled, or dead, scattered to the wind. The cabin still burned, sending black smoke into the clear morning sky like a signal fire visible for miles. Colt and Mara stood together, watching it burn, neither speaking, just breathing, just alive. Tumble limped over, favoring his right foreleg but tail wagging. Mara dropped to her knees and hugged him, burying her face in his fur, and the dog tolerated it with patient dignity. "It's over," she whispered. Colt looked at the ruins, at the bodies, at the blood soaking into earth that had seen too much of it. "Yeah," he said, "it's over." But even as he said it, he knew the truth was more complicated. The fight was over. The war was over. But what came next? Rebuilding, healing, learning to live with what they'd done and what had been done to them, that was just beginning. And this time, impossibly, neither of them would face it alone. The smoke climbed higher, visible for 20 miles in every direction, a black column that told the territory something had happened at Raven Gorge. Within hours, riders would come to investigate. Marshals, maybe, or opportunists looking to pick the bones. Either way, Colt and Mara couldn't be here when they arrived. Crow lay in the dirt where he'd fallen, chest barely rising, eyes glassy. He wouldn't last another hour. The men who'd fled into the hills wouldn't be back, not without their leader, not with 3 dead and 2 more bleeding out in the sage. The battle was won. But standing in the ashes of everything Colt had built over 5 years of solitude, victory tasted like ash and copper. "We need to move," he said, voice rough from smoke and shouting. "Gather what we can carry. Food, ammunition, blankets. We've got maybe 2 hours before someone shows up asking questions we don't want to answer." Mara nodded, still kneeling beside Tumble, her hands gentle on his injured leg. "He's hurt. Can he travel?" Colt crouched down, running careful fingers over the dog's foreleg. Tumble whined but didn't pull away. "Sprained, maybe cracked. He can walk, but not far." He looked at Mara. "We'll have to go slow." "Where are we going?" Good question. Fort Casper was closest, but also the first place anyone would look. North meant Montana and more Crow territory. South meant crossing open prairie with winter coming on. West led deeper into the mountains, into land so wild even the trappers avoided it in cold months. Colt stood, surveying the ruins. The barn still stood, scorched but intact. The cabin was a total loss. Nothing but charred timbers and memories turning to smoke. Everything he'd owned, everything he'd saved from the wreckage of his old life, was gone. And somehow he felt freer than he had in years. "West," he said. "Into the high country. There's an old trapper's cabin I used once, back when I was running freight through the passes. Remote, defendable, and nobody knows about it except me and the bears." "How far?" 3 days on foot, 5 if the weather turns." Mara stood, wincing as her wounded arm pulled. The graze had stopped bleeding, but it needed cleaning, stitching maybe. Another scar to add to the collection. "Then we'd better start walking." They salvaged what they could from the barn, dried venison, hardtack, a canvas tarp that could serve as shelter. Colt retrieved his saddlebags from where he'd hidden them under the floorboards, grateful he'd had the paranoia to stash emergency supplies. Inside were matches, fish hooks, a small pot, and the last $20 he owned wadded up and tied with string. Mara found a canteen, filled it from the pump that somehow still worked, and slung it over her shoulder. She looked at the pistol on her hip, then at Colt. "Should we take his guns? The dead men's?" "Ammunition, yes. Guns if they're better than what we have. But leave the bodies. Let whoever finds them put together their own story." They worked in silence, efficient, not looking at the corpses scattered across the clearing. Death had become commonplace in the last hour, something to step over and move past. Later, maybe, there'd be time to feel it, but not now. Now was for survival. Tumble limped over to where Crow lay dying, sniffed once, then turned away like the man wasn't worth remembering. The dog had better instincts than most humans. Colt knelt beside Crow one last time. The rancher's eyes tracked him, still conscious, still aware. Blood bubbled at his lips when he tried to speak. "Something you want to say?" Colt asked, not unkindly. Crow's mouth moved. "She'll never be free. My men, your men are dead or running. Your ranch will be divided up by creditors before the month's out. And the girls you kept locked in that bunkhouse? Someone will find them now, set them loose, and you won't be around to stop it." Colt stood. "You're already a ghost, Crow. You just haven't finished dying yet." He walked away, leaving Crow to the crows and the silence. Mara waited by the tree line, pack on her back, ready. She'd tied her hair back with a strip of cloth, changed into the spare trousers and shirt Colt had pulled from the barn. She looked nothing like the half-dead girl Tumble had found 2 weeks ago. She looked like someone who'd walked through fire and come out forged into something that wouldn't break. "Ready?" Colt asked. She looked back at the burning cabin one last time. Nothing left to stay for. They walked west as the sun climbed higher, 3 figures moving through sage and stone. A scarred man with a ruined hand, a woman with a bullet scar on her shoulder, and a limping dog who'd saved them both. Behind them, smoke continued to rise, marking the place where Mara Quinn had died and been reborn, where Colt Harlan had finally stopped running from the past and started fighting for a future. The first day was hard. Tumble's leg worsened by mid-afternoon, forcing them to stop every hour to rest. Mara's wounded arm stiffened, making it difficult to carry her pack. Colt's back screamed where the old bullet wound lived, each step a reminder that he wasn't 20 anymore, that the body kept accounts the mind tried to ignore. But they pushed on, following deer trails and creek beds, staying off the main routes where Crow's surviving men might be lurking. They saw no one. The territory was vast, empty, indifferent to human drama. By nightfall, they'd covered maybe 8 miles, less than Colt had hoped, but more than he'd feared. They made camp in a hollow between 2 ridges, sheltered from wind, with a spring trickling nearby. Colt built a tiny fire, barely enough to heat water, nothing that would show for miles. They ate cold venison and hardtack, washing it down with spring water so cold it hurt their teeth. "Tell me about this cabin we're heading to," Mara said, wrapping herself in the tarp against the dropping temperature. Colt fed small sticks to the fire, watching sparks spiral into darkness. "Belonged to a French trapper named Beaumont. He worked these mountains for 20 years, trapping beaver and marten, trading with the Shoshone. One winter, he didn't come back to Fort Bridger. Rangers found him the next spring, frozen in his cabin, surrounded by a season's worth of pelts he never got to sell." "That's cheerful." "Point is, the cabin's solid. Stone foundation, good roof, positioned where the mountains block the worst storms. Beaumont knew what he was doing. If we can make it there, we can winter over, heal up, figure out what comes next." Mara was quiet for a moment, staring into the tiny flames. "And then what? Spring comes? We just walk back into civilization like nothing happened? Crow's people will talk. Someone will come asking questions." "Let them ask. They'll find a burned ranch, some dead men, and no witnesses worth believing. Crow's operation wasn't exactly legal. A lot of people will be happy to see him gone, won't look too hard at how it happened." "You hope?" "Yeah, I hope." Colt looked at her across the fire. "But if I'm wrong, if trouble finds us, we deal with it same as we dealt with Crow. Together." That word again. Together. It was becoming their answer to everything, the foundation they built on when nothing else was certain. Tumble limped over and collapsed between them, exhausted, trusting them to keep watch while he slept. Mara reached out and scratched behind his ears. "We owe him everything," she said softly. "If he hadn't found me, if he hadn't brought you—" "He did. That's what matters. I want to do something for him. When we get to the cabin, when things settle, something to thank him." Colt smiled, rare and genuine. "He's a dog. Give him a warm place to sleep and a full belly, he'll think he died and went to heaven. Still, he deserves something special." They took turns on watch that night, 2 hours each, though neither slept much. Every sound, wind in the rocks, a distant coyote, the rustle, of some small creature in the brush, brought them alert, hands on weapons. The aftermath of battle lived in their nerves, adrenaline that wouldn't fade, the body's refusal to believe the danger had passed. Dawn came cold and gray, promising rain. They broke camp fast, buried the fire, and moved out before full light. Colt's knee had stiffened overnight, making him limp almost as bad as Tumble. Mara saw it but didn't mention it, just adjusted her pace to match his without comment. Small kindnesses mattered more than grand gestures out here. The second day was worse. Rain came at mid-morning, cold and steady, soaking through their clothes, turning the ground to slick mud. Tumble's limp became pronounced, forcing more frequent stops. By afternoon, the dog was barely walking, just standing wherever Colt set him down, eyes apologetic. "We can't push him anymore," Mara said, kneeling in the mud beside the dog. "He needs rest." "We're still 6, maybe 7 miles from the cabin. Can't stop here in the open." "Then I'll carry him." Colt looked at her wounded arm, at the exhaustion in her face, at the determination that wouldn't quit. "You can barely carry yourself." "Then we both carry him. Take turns, whatever it takes." She met his eyes. "He didn't leave me to die. I'm not leaving him." So they did. Colt rigged a sling from the tarp, and they took turns carrying Tumble across their shoulders like a haunch of venison. The dog tolerated it with patient dignity, understanding somehow that they were helping, that the pain in his leg made this necessary. The rain continued, turning the world gray and formless. They climbed higher into the mountains, following a trail Colt remembered more by feel than sight. The trees changed from sage to pine, the air thinned, and their breath started to fog. Winter was coming to the high country earlier than usual, chasing them toward shelter. By the time they spotted the cabin, twilight was falling, and they were both stumbling with exhaustion. It sat in a small valley, backed against a cliff face, surrounded by pine and aspen. Exactly as Colt remembered. Stone walls, split log roof, a single window facing south to catch what sun the mountains allowed. They staggered the last 100 yards, and Colt kicked the door open, half expecting to find Beaumont's skeleton still sitting by the cold hearth. But the cabin was empty, just bare walls and a dirt floor, and the lingering smell of old smoke. Someone had been here since Beaumont died, cleaned it out, left it ready for the next desperate soul who needed shelter. Mara collapsed against the wall, sliding down to sit in the dirt, breathing like she'd run miles. Colt lowered Tumble gently to the floor, and the dog immediately curled up and closed his eyes, done with walking for the foreseeable future. "We made it," Mara whispered. Colt stood in the doorway, looking back the way they'd come. No lights, no fires, no signs of pursuit. Just rain and darkness and the vast indifference of mountains that had seen 1,000 human dramas and would see 1,000 more. "Yeah," he said, "we made it." Over the next 3 days, they transformed the cabin from bare shelter into something resembling a home. Colt repaired the roof where weather had opened gaps, stuffing moss and bark into cracks. Mara cleaned the interior, sweeping out years of debris, scrubbing the hearth until it was ready for fire. Together they gathered firewood, enough to last a month if they were careful, stacking it against the north wall where it would stay dry. Tumble's leg improved with rest. By the 3rd day, he was putting weight on it again, limping around the cabin's perimeter, establishing territory, marking trees with the seriousness of a dog who'd decided this was home now. Mara's arm healed too. Colt cleaned the wound each evening, watching pink healthy flesh replace damaged tissue. No infection, no fever. She was young, strong, resilient in ways that still surprised him. The bullet scar on her shoulder was settling into a permanent reminder, a star-shaped mark she'd carry forever. "Does it bother you?" she asked one evening, catching him looking at it while he changed the bandage. "What?" "The scar, knowing I'll always have it." Colt tied off the clean cloth. "No, it bothers me that you had to get it in the first place. But the scar itself? That's just proof you survived. Nothing wrong with proof." She touched the mark, feeling its shape. "I used to think about scars as ugly things. Damage, something to hide. And now? Now I think they're stories. Every mark tells how you lived, what you fought, what tried to kill you and failed." She looked at his ruined hand. "What's your story? You never said how you lost the fingers." Colt flexed the damaged hand, feeling the ghost ache where nerves remembered what wasn't there anymore. Worked a cattle drive up from Texas 5 years back. Longhorn got spooked during a river crossing, tangled in the rope I was holding. Choice was let go or lose the hand. I tried to do both, compromise. Lost 3 fingers and nearly the whole hand before someone cut me free. Did you finish the drive? Yeah, wrapped it in whiskey and rags, finished the last 200 miles. Didn't seem right to quit just because it hurt. Mara smiled. That's the stubbornest thing I've ever heard. Stubbornness kept me breathing more times than I can count. Me too. She flexed her wounded arm, testing the range of motion. When Crow's men left me to die, I could have laid there and let it happen. Would have been easier. But something in me just refused. Kept thinking, not like this, not in the dirt like I don't matter. If I'm dying, it'll be on my feet, fighting. That's not stubbornness, Colt said quietly. That's strength. Real strength. The kind that doesn't quit. She looked at him across the small space of the cabin, firelight painting them both in amber and shadow. You gave me that, the chance to be strong instead of just surviving. No, you always had it. I just gave you room to remember. The silence that followed was comfortable, warm, the quiet understanding of 2 people who'd bled together and knew each other's worth without needing constant proof. Outside, snow began to fall, first flakes of winter coming early, settling on pine branches and turning the world white. Tumble barked once at the window, excited by the change, then settled back by the fire. Looks like we're staying here a while, Mara observed. Colt moved to the door, looking out at the falling snow. Already an inch had accumulated, and it showed no signs of stopping. Could be snowed in for weeks once it really starts. You ready for that? Being stuck in a one-room cabin with me and a dog? I've survived worse company. He laughed, surprising himself. When was the last time he'd laughed? Before Rebecca died, probably. Before the world taught him that caring about people just gave fate more ways to hurt you. But here he was, caring anyway. Caring about this woman who'd stumbled into his life bleeding and desperate, who'd learned to fight like hell, who looked at his scars and saw stories instead of damage. Caring about a dog who'd found her when he'd given up looking for anything worth finding. The snow fell heavier, building drifts against the cabin walls, sealing them into the high country until spring. And for the first time in 5 years, Colt Harlan wasn't afraid of being trapped, because being trapped with people who mattered was different from being alone. That night, while Mara slept and Tumble snored by the fire, Colt sat by the window watching snow transform the landscape into something clean and new. He thought about Crow, dead in the dirt by now, picked clean by scavengers or buried by whoever found him first. He thought about the cabin at Raven Gorge, reduced to ash and memory. He thought about Rebecca, about all the people he'd failed to save, all the ghosts that rode his shoulders. And for the first time, he felt them loosen their grip. Not gone. They'd never be gone, but quieter. Willing to let him carry someone else's weight for a while. Willing to let him live. The weeks passed in steady rhythm. They hunted when the weather allowed, bringing down deer and rabbit, smoking meat to last through deep winter. They mended clothes, told stories, taught each other survival tricks learned from different lives. Mara showed Colt how to preserve vegetables using methods her mother had taught her. Colt taught Mara how to read animal tracks, predict weather, navigate by stars when the clouds cleared. Tumble healed completely, his limp disappearing until only the memory remained. He spent his days patrolling the perimeter, keeping watch, making sure nothing dangerous approached their sanctuary. At night, he slept between them, a warm presence that made the cabin feel less empty. One evening, 6 weeks into their isolation, Mara looked up from the rabbit she was skinning and asked the question Colt had been waiting for. What happens when spring comes? Colt set down the harness he was mending. What do you want to happen? I asked first, he smiled. Fair enough. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to stay here forever, forget the world exists. But that's not living. That's just hiding in a different place. And the other part? The other part thinks maybe it's time to stop running, go back down to the territories, find some land nobody's claimed, build something real. Not much, just a small ranch, enough to keep busy, enough to matter. Mara finished skinning the rabbit, set it aside. Alone? Colt met her eyes. That depends. On what? On whether you want to build something too. Or if you'd rather head east, start fresh somewhere nobody knows your story. She was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. I spent 3 years in a cage, Colt. Told every day what to do, where to go, who to be. I'm not trading one cage for another, even a nicer one. If I stay, it's as a partner. Equal say, equal work, equal risk. Not as your project or your responsibility. I wouldn't want it any other way. Then I'm staying, because you're right. It's time to stop running, time to build something that can't be taken away. She looked at him. Together. There was that word again. But this time it meant something more, something bigger than just surviving the next fight. It meant a future, a plan, a reason to care what happened tomorrow. Colt held out his damaged hand. Mara took it without hesitation, her grip firm and sure. Together, he agreed. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, but inside the cabin was warm, solid, safe. And in the spring, when the snows melted and the passes opened, 2 people and a dog would walk down from the mountains, carrying nothing but scars, stories, and the unbreakable certainty that they'd earned the right to build a life on their own terms. But that was months away. For now, there was firewood to split, meat to smoke, and the quiet satisfaction of surviving another day in a world that tried its best to break them. They'd survive Danner Crow. They'd survive winter. And whatever came after, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Standing together, refusing to quit, proving every single day that some things were worth fighting for. Spring came reluctantly to the high country, arriving in fits and starts. 3 days of warmth followed by a late snow, then sun again, then freezing rain. But slowly, inexorably, the ice retreated. Streams began to run. Deer returned to the valleys, and the world that had been frozen silent for 4 months started to breathe again. Colt stood on the ridge above the cabin, watching meltwater carve new channels through the rocks. Beside him, Mara scanned the horizon with the watchfulness she'd learned in winter, always looking, always aware that safety was temporary and hard-won. Trail should be passable in another week, Colt said. Maybe less if this warm spell holds. And then? Then we go down. Find the land office in South Pass City, file a claim on some acreage nobody wants. Start building. Mara nodded, but didn't move, still looking out at the mountains that had sheltered them. I'm going to miss this place. The quiet. Knowing exactly where the dangers are. World down there's got its own kind of quiet if you know where to look. And the dangers, Colt shrugged. We've handled worse. They walked back to the cabin where Tumble waited on the porch, gray muzzle lifted to catch the spring scents. The dog had aged over the winter, moving slower, sleeping more. Nothing dramatic, just the inevitable arithmetic of a hard life catching up. But his eyes were still bright, still watching, still protecting the people who'd become his pack. Inside, Colt pulled out the $20 he'd saved, smoothing the worn bills on the table. Not much to start a ranch with, but it's enough for supplies, maybe a few head of cattle if we buy smart. I've got $7, Mara said, producing crumpled bills from her own stash. Sewed into my dress before I ran from Crow. Forgot I had them until last week. $27. Colt looked at the money, at the entire fortune they possessed between them. We've built more with less. Have we? No, but we will. The week passed in preparation. They smoked the last of the winter meat, packed what gear they'd accumulated, buried what they couldn't carry. Colt carved their initials into the cabin's doorframe, CH and MQ, with TD for Tumble below, marking their passage, leaving proof they'd survived. On the morning they left, Mara stood in the doorway, looking back at the small room that had been their whole world for months. Thank you, she said quietly. It's just a cabin, Colt replied. No. It's the place where I stopped being afraid, where I learned the difference between surviving and living. She touched the doorframe, fingers tracing the carved letters. That matters. They walked down from the mountains as the sun climbed higher, 3 figures moving through pine and aspen, leaving winter behind. The journey took 4 days, following game trails and creek beds, camping in the open now that the killing cold had passed. At night they built real fires, not worried about smoke giving them away. The world felt larger, more forgiving, ready to let them try again. On the third day, they saw their first humans since the battle. A family in a covered wagon heading west, looking for opportunity in Oregon country. The father tensed when he saw Colt's rifle, but relaxed when Mara smiled and Tumble wagged his tail. "You folks heading to South Pass?" the father asked, his wife and 3 children peering from the wagon. "That's the plan," Colt replied. "Might want to reconsider. Town's been rough lately. A lot of anger about some cattle baron who got himself killed last fall. Danner Crow ran a big operation north of here. Someone burned his ranch, shot him, and half his crew. Law's still looking for whoever did it." Colt kept his expression neutral. "They have any leads?" "Not really. Some say it was claim jumpers. Others say it was Indians. Still others say it was Crow's own men turning on him. Story changes depending on who's telling." The father leaned forward. "But here's the thing. Nobody seems too broken up about it. Crow wasn't well liked, ran roughshod over folks, took what he wanted, made enemies. So the law's asking questions, but nobody's answering. Probably won't ever find who did it." "Probably not," Colt agreed. They parted ways, the wagon heading west, Colt and Mara continuing south. When the wagon was out of sight, Mara let out a breath she'd been holding. "That was easier than I expected." People believe what makes sense to them. Crow had enemies. Someone killed him. The details don't matter as much as the ending. Colt adjusted his pack. "We're just 2 drifters looking for land. Nobody worth a second glance. Still, we should be careful in town. Keep our heads down, do our business, get out." Agreed. South Pass City sprawled across a valley like something built in a hurry and never properly finished. Canvas tents mixed with rough timber buildings, muddy streets churned by wagon wheels and cattle hooves, the whole place buzzing with the manic energy of people chasing gold, silver, land, or just running from somewhere worse. They tied Tumble outside the land office with a bowl of water and instructions to guard their packs. The dog settled into watch position, understanding his job without needing words. Inside, a clerk with ink-stained fingers and wire spectacles looked up from a massive ledger. "Help you?" "Looking to file a homestead claim," Colt said. 160 acres if there's anything available." The clerk pulled out a map, unrolling it across the scarred desk. "Depends what you're willing to take. Good bottomland near water is mostly claimed. But if you don't mind working harder," he pointed to an area southwest of town. "Got some acreage here near Willow Creek. Rocky soil, needs clearing, but it's got water year-round and decent grass for cattle. Been surveyed, ready for filing." Colt studied the map, noting the creek, the ridgelines, the distance from town. Isolated, but not impossibly remote. Defensible. "What's the cost?" "Filing fee's $18. Then you got 5 years to prove up. Build a dwelling, cultivate land, live on it. Do that. The land's yours free and clear." $18. That left them 9 for supplies, cattle, everything else they'd need to survive until the land could support them. Tight, damn tight, but possible. "We'll take it," Mara said before Colt could speak. The clerk looked at her, then at Colt. "Both of you filing?" "We're partners," Colt said carefully. "Equal claim. Law says a woman can file a homestead claim same as a man, long as she's head of household." The clerk pulled out the forms. "But joint claims get complicated. Legally speaking—" "Then file it in her name," Colt interrupted. "Mara Quinn, primary claimant. I'm just helping work the land." Mara turned to him. "Colt, you don't have to what?" "Yeah, I do. Crow came after you because he thought you were property that belonged to him. This way, the land belongs to you. Legal, binding, no man can take it away." He met her eyes. "That matter to you?" She swallowed hard, blinking against sudden wetness. "Yeah, it matters." They signed the papers, paid the $18, and walked out of the land office with a deed that said Mara Quinn owned 160 acres of Wyoming territory. It was just paper, just words, but it might as well have been a crown for the way Mara held it. "Thank you," she said when they were back on the street. "Don't thank me. You earned it. Every scar, every bullet, every mile we walked to get here, you earned this." They spent the remaining $9 on supplies. Seed potatoes, flour, salt, coffee, nails, a second-hand saw, and 2 scrawny chickens the general store owner swore were excellent layers despite evidence to the contrary. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "We'll need cattle eventually," Colt said, loading their purchases onto the pack horse they'd bought for $3 and a promise to pay more when they had it. "Can't run a ranch without stock. One thing at a time. First we build shelter. Then we plant. Then we figure out cattle." They rode southwest out of town, following the creek the clerk had indicated, and by evening they'd found their land. It was exactly as described, rocky, overgrown, needing work. But the creek ran clear and cold, the grass was thick in the meadows, and when Colt climbed the highest point, he could see for miles in every direction. Nobody could approach without being seen. "What do you think?" Mara asked, standing beside him. Colt looked at the valley, at the way evening light turned everything gold, at the space and possibility stretched before them. "I think it's perfect." They built the cabin where the land leveled out near the creek, close to water, sheltered from north winds by a stand of cottonwoods. Working from dawn until they couldn't see anymore, they cut timber, hauled stone, dug a foundation with their bare hands and borrowed tools. It took 6 weeks of brutal labor, every muscle screaming, every old injury protesting, but slowly the cabin took shape. Mara worked beside Colt without complaint, hauling logs she had no business being able to lift, mixing mud for chinking, climbing onto the roof to help lay shingles. When her shoulder ached too much to continue, she switched to other tasks, planting the potato crop, tending the chickens, fishing the creek for their supper. Tumble appointed himself supervisor, lying in the shade and barking occasionally when he felt the work wasn't progressing fast enough. His presence was comfort and continuity, a reminder that they'd survived worse than building a home. By midsummer, the cabin was finished. 1 room, dirt floor, a stone fireplace Colt built with meticulous care. Not fancy, not big, but solid. Theirs. The first night they slept inside, Mara lay on the corn husk mattress they'd stuffed themselves and stared at the ceiling beams. "We did it." "Yeah." Colt sat in the chair he'd constructed from scrap lumber, watching firelight dance across walls that would shelter them through the coming winter. "We did." "I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for Crow's ghost to show up, or the law, or I don't know, something." "Nothing's coming. We're just 2 people trying to make a life, worlds full of people doing the same thing." "Were you ever just 2 people before?" Mara asked quietly. "Or were you always running?" Colt was silent for a long time. "I was someone once, before Rebecca died, before I lost the hand, before I decided being alone was safer. I was a son, a brother, someone who believed work and decency mattered. Then I learned the world didn't care about any of that, and I became someone else. And now? Now I'm trying to remember who I was before I gave up." Mara sat up, looking at him across the small space. "You saved my life, Colt. You gave me a chance when you didn't have to. You taught me to fight, to be strong, to believe I was worth saving. You gave me land, a home, a future. You think that's someone who gave up?" "I think that's someone who got a second chance he didn't deserve and is trying like hell not to waste it." "Then stop thinking you don't deserve it. We both earned this. Together." That word, worn smooth by repetition, carrying the weight of everything they'd survived and everything they were building. Colt nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. The months that followed were hard but good. They worked the land, learning its rhythms and demands. The potato crop came in better than expected. The chickens actually laid eggs. They traded labor with neighboring homesteaders, helping with harvests in exchange for seed, fixing wagons for a share of beef, slowly building the connections that turned strangers into community. No one asked about their past. Out here, everyone was running from something or towards something, and the details mattered less than the work you did and the word you kept. Colt and Mara became known as reliable, fair, willing to help when help was needed. That was currency more valuable than gold. By autumn, they had enough saved to buy 2 pregnant cows from a rancher liquidating his herd. The animals were scraggly, half-wild, but they were a start. Colt built a small corral and barn, working with the same methodical patience he brought to everything. Mara helped, learning as she went, asking questions, making mistakes, figuring it out. One evening in late September, as the aspens turned gold and the air carried the first bite of coming winter, They sat on the porch watching Tumble patrol the property line. The dog moved slower now, his muzzle almost entirely gray, but he still took his duties seriously. "He's getting old," Mara said softly. "Yeah, we all are." "I'm serious. He's what, 9, 10 years old? That's ancient for a dog who lived the life he's lived." Colt watched Tumble complete his circuit and trot back to collapse on the porch with a satisfied sigh. "He's earned rest, more than earned it. I want to do something for him, something special, before—" Mara's voice caught. "Before we can't anymore." "Like what?" "I don't know. Something that says thank you, that says we know what he did, what he gave us." They thought about it for days, trying to find the right gesture, the right way to honor a dog who'd found a dying girl in the dust and changed 3 lives by refusing to leave her there. In the end, Mara knew exactly what to do. She spent 2 weeks carving a marker from a flat piece of granite Colt hauled from the creek. Working slowly, carefully, using borrowed tools and infinite patience, she inscribed words into the stone. Not fancy, not poetic, just true. When it was finished, she showed Colt. The stone read, "Tumble. Found what was lost. Saved what mattered. Loved without question." "It's for when the time comes," she explained. "So he'll have something permanent, so people will know." Colt ran his fingers over the carved letters, feeling the depth of each word. "It's perfect." But Tumble wasn't done yet. The old dog rallied with the cool weather, finding energy he'd been saving, spending his days exploring the property, his evenings by the fire. He'd earned his rest, but he wasn't ready to take it. Winter came again, their second in the high country, but this time they had walls, supplies, a foundation that wouldn't wash away. They survived the cold months working on small projects. Colt built furniture, Mara sewed clothes from traded fabric, both of them planning improvements for spring. And in the quiet hours they talked. About the future they were building, about the past they'd survived, about the strange mathematics of trauma and healing that didn't follow any logical progression. Some days Mara woke up screaming from dreams of Crow. Some days Colt's hand ached where fingers used to be, and the phantom pain was unbearable. But they had each other, and they had the work, and slowly the good days outnumbered the bad. Spring returned, and with it came word from town. The investigation into Danner Crow's death had been officially closed. No suspects, no leads, case gone cold. Whatever the man had been, whatever he'd done, it was history now. The world had moved on. "We're free," Mara said when Colt brought the news back from South Pass City. "Really, truly free." "Yeah, how's it feel?" She thought about it, looking around at the cabin they'd built, the land they'd claimed, the life they'd carved from nothing but stubbornness and refusal to quit. "Terrifying. Like any minute someone's going to realize we don't deserve this and take it away." "Nobody's taking anything. We paid for this in blood and scars and miles walked through snow. It's ours." That summer they expanded, bought 3 more cows, built a proper barn, cleared another 5 acres for planting. Neighbors came by to help with the heavy work, and Colt and Mara returned the favor, weaving themselves deeper into the fabric of the territory. They were becoming permanent fixtures, people who'd last, people who mattered. And then, one morning in early fall, Tumble didn't get up. Colt found him in his favorite spot under the cottonwood, lying peaceful, eyes closed. He knelt beside the old dog, feeling for breath, for heartbeat, for any sign of the fierce spirit that had saved them all. Nothing. "Mara," he called quietly. "Come here." She knew before she reached them. Knew from the tone of his voice, from the way the world felt suddenly emptier. She knelt beside Colt and placed her hand on Tumble's still warm fur. "He didn't suffer," Colt said. "Just went to sleep and didn't wake up. Best way a dog like him could go." Mara nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He saved my life, saved both our lives, and we never got to thank him properly." He knew. Dogs always know. They buried him on the ridge overlooking the valley, the highest point on their land where he could watch over everything he'd protected. Colt dug the grave deep while Mara retrieved the stone she'd carved months ago, carrying it up the hill with reverent care. They lowered Tumble into the earth wrapped in Mara's old coat, the one she'd worn the day he found her, blood-soaked and desperate. It seemed right, completing the circle. Colt placed the marker at the head of the grave while Mara spoke, her voice steady despite the tears. You found me when I was dying, and you didn't leave me. You brought me to someone who would fight for me when I couldn't fight for myself. You protected us, guarded us, loved us without asking anything in return. She touched the stone. Thank you, Tumble. Thank you for everything. We'll carry you with us always. They stood together as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of gold and red, two people in a dog-shaped absence learning to live with one more scar, one more loss, one more price paid for daring to love something. But even in grief, there was gratitude. Because without Tumble, Mara would have died on that ridge. Without Tumble, Colt would still be alone in a burned cabin, hiding from life. Without Tumble, none of this, the land, the home, the partnership that had become something deeper than either of them had words for, would exist. The dog had found what was lost and saved what mattered. And in doing so, he'd given them the greatest gift possible, a future worth fighting for. Years passed. The ranch grew. 5 cows became 10, became 20. The cabin gained a second room, then a proper porch, then a barn big enough to weather any storm. Mara's name went on the deed, then Colt's beside it when they made the partnership legal in every way that mattered. Other homesteaders struggling to survive found their way to the ranch, drawn by stories of a place that took people in, gave them work and dignity, asked no questions about where they'd come from. Mara and Colt hired them, housed them, taught them the skills they'd learned through trial and error. The land that had saved 2 broken people became a haven for others seeking the same second chance. Local people started calling it the Tumble Ranch, though no one could quite remember who started the name. They said a woman had crawled out of death there, that she'd burned a tyrant's empire to ash, that she'd built something good from the wreckage of her worst day. The stories grew in the telling, becoming legend, becoming myth. But Mara and Colt knew the truth was simpler and more profound. A dog had refused to leave a dying girl alone. A man had chosen to fight when walking away would have been easier. 2 people had decided together was better than alone. And from those small choices, a life had grown. On autumn evenings, when the work was done and the valley turned gold, Mara would climb the ridge to Tumble's grave and sit beside the weathered stone marker. She'd tell him about the day, the calves that were born, the fence that needed mending, the young woman who'd arrived last week running from a man who thought he owned her and who'd found safety within their walls. We're doing good work, she'd say to the silent stone, the kind of work that matters, the kind you'd be proud of. And sometimes, when the wind moved through the grass just right, it almost sounded like the satisfied huff of a dog who knew his job was done and done well. Colt would find her there eventually, climbing the ridge with the same slight limp he'd carried since the battle, sitting beside her in comfortable silence. Together they'd watch the sun set over land they'd claimed, over a life they'd built from nothing, over proof that some things, love, partnership, the stubborn refusal to quit, were stronger than bullets, fire, or the cruelty of men who thought they could break what they couldn't control. You ever regret it? Mara asked one evening, the question she'd never asked in all the years they'd been together. Choosing to save me instead of staying safe? Colt looked at the valley below. The ranch house with smoke rising from the chimney, the cattle dotting the meadows, the people moving through their evening routines, the community they'd built from ashes and determination. Not once, he said. Not for a single second. Mara leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the reality of this life they'd fought so hard to claim. Me neither. They sat together as darkness fell. 2 people who'd walked through hell and come out holding hands, who'd learned that the deepest scars told the best stories, who'd proven every single day that what seemed broken could be forged into something stronger. Below them, the ranch lights came on one by one, marking home, marking safety, marking the place where a girl who'd been left to die had instead learned to live. And on the ridge above it all, a weathered stone kept watch over the valley, bearing witness to the truth that changed everything. A dog had found her in the dust when the world said she didn't matter, and from that moment forward, her whole destiny had changed direction. Not because someone saved her, but because she'd chosen to save herself, and had found someone willing to stand beside her while she did. The wind moved through the grass, carrying the scent of pine and sage and home. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, if you listen close enough, you could almost hear the contented sigh of a dog who'd done his job well and could finally rest, knowing the people he'd brought together would take care of each other long after his watch had ended. The story that started with blood in the dust ended with light in the valley. And that, more than anything, was the victory that mattered most.